All right, so at this stage of the game, you should have your entire drawing here worked out in terms of every object, not every single one, the ones that are behind forms and whatever, super small ones, you don't have to include them, but as many objects as you possibly can, the rectangle, its placement, its proportion, its location, that's what I mean by placement, in relationship to the point of reference. So this is my point of reference here, you can see on the project page. And I use this, as you watched in the video, to compare spaces to the height of this and compare it to something else. It's a comparative relationship. So you build from something that you know is true, and then you start to build everything around it. You don't want to rely your information on secondary points of references. I mean, you can build from it, but secondary points of references are the second kind of things you put in. Don't build this directly on that. You always want to go back to your point of reference and still compare and contrast and just build this up simultaneously. Once you get to this point though, you've completed the first stage, which is the most difficult stage. It's a lot of measuring, a lot of segging, a lot of kind of trying to figure things out, a lot of moving. Then you kind of get to the fun part. The fun part is actually putting on an ellipse, putting on information to make the object actually look like the object instead of a rectangle. So I'm going to back it up just a little bit so you can see some of the still life. Okay, so this is my I'm looking at the camera here so you can see what I see. I'm going to work here. This is my point of reference, which is that white water pitcher. And I might use at home I don't want you to use anything harder than an H, possibly a 2H at this point. I'm going to use an HB or a B just so you can see what I'm doing in the camera. So when I drew this, I did not take in consideration the spout or the handle that you can kind of see in the back. Not interested in that. I'm just only interested in the widest part, which is there at the bottom, and how tall it is. And that represents my rectangle. So I'm going to break down this form, and I've already done a complete video on that. But I'm going to break down this form first. The reason I'm going to break this form down first instead of kind of working my way up, I'd rather work my way down because I have a lot of room here. And if for some reason, if I work my way down and I realize that I didn't measure this rectangle correctly, I can still move it and it's not going to disrupt my composition. Whereas if I work my way up, I don't have much room there and that will disrupt my composition. All right, first things first, I need to find out where, or possibly there's an ellipse there at the bottom. I can put that ellipse in. And I need to find out how deep into the form this diagonal goes. Again, I did a whole video on this, so you can watch that. But the first thing I'm going to do is divide, because this is a symmetrical form, not including the spout or the handle. So I'm going to put a dividing line down the center. First thing, okay? So I'm lining this up, and you might say I have a ruler here, but my little trick is that I'm just kind of lining two lines up between the center, and I find my center point. It's a fast way of doing it. That B pencil is a little too soft. Now, just like you've done before, I call this breaking down the forms. And when you break down the forms, you're doing exactly what I'm doing here. You're drawing the individual characteristic of those forms. So the next thing is the maybe the angle. So I'm going to measure. I'm going to measure this small part here, the width of that, because I can always add a little bit to the top. But I'm going to measure the width at the bottom, and I'm going to connect it up here. But before I do that, well, actually, yeah, I'm just going to measure the width at the bottom, the skinniest part of that vessel. I'm going to compare it, what I compare it to, the width at the bottom here. It's the only thing I can compare it to. So basically, I'm measuring the width of this guy, and I'm comparing it to the down at the bottom. And if you see where my finger is, and then you see the tip of the pencil, oops, because I moved. It's not easy. All right, there's my width. You can see where the tip of the pencil is. Looks like it's about 2/3 of the size. That's what I'm gonna check right now. It's about 2/3, and I'd say it's about right here. So I'm gonna mark a mark right here. And I'm going to take this, or take this as my width up here, and I'm gonna mark it. So it should be like right here and right here. So what I just did is I just guessed to see if that was called guess and check. Those 2 marks there, your whole drawing should be a lot of marks. I'm gonna take these 2 marks that I just placed down and see if it equals this. It doesn't, I made them too big. So I'm gonna go in a little bit. Now I'm gonna measure them here and put them down there and see if it fits perfectly. And then I wanna make sure that this is equivalent to the other side. So this is where I get a piece of sketch paper, which I can't find. 1 second. 1 second. All right. I have a piece of paper here I found. What I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna rip off a little section here, is I'm gonna measure this here from the center to that mark I made and see if it's equivalent to the other side. And it is, I kind of eyed it up well. So what I'm gonna do now is, since I know these 2 marks, I'm just gonna make those marks a little bit more obvious so I know that they are the ones I need to connect to. And then, because this is actually a tricky form, it's not as easy as it looks. This skinny part right here is a little lower, plus the ellipse, because the back of the ellipse represents this line right here. So I have to go down as much as that is and draw a line across, and then I can pull these down and then I can connect them. So I'm gonna explain what I'm talking about in a second. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure from, oh my God, why can't I do this in reverse? There we go. I'm gonna measure there and maybe compare it to the width. I'm gonna count it in. Oh, it's gonna count forever. It's not even worth measuring. I'm just going to say, hey, it's about this far down, because the ellipse is probably about like right here. The top ellipse is about right there. And then the bottom ellipse is right here. So I actually went down further than I wanted to, further than I expected. So that's what I'm gonna go with right there. You can measure, but it's gonna count so many times. And there's really nothing else to compare it to. Maybe on those coffee things, but again, that's just too far away. So I'm gonna throw this in here. If I have to make an adjustment later, I make an adjustment later. So I drew that line across, and now I can pull these lines down. And because I'm using this graph ruler, I don't have to worry about my lines being unstraight on a diagonal. They're gonna be straight because I'm lining them up with the existing lines that are there, because my other lines are straight. All right, so now I have that. The next thing I can do is I can connect. Well, I'm not gonna connect it yet. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw this ellipse there at the bottom. Okay, so if I draw the ellipse at the bottom, how come that does not look straight? It's a little off. I'm not sure why that's a little off. Sorry, guys. My center line was not great. Okay, so my ellipse here at the bottom, how big is it? You can't see it that well here, but if you see where my pencil is, see where that, the end of the ellipse kind of runs back into the form? If I were to measure the bottom to that point right here, where the ellipse starts going in, that's half the size. My viewpoint's a little bit different than yours. My eyesight's a little higher, so I can see a little bit more. So what I'm gonna do is find that halfway point. One, two. Okay, so I just doubled it, and now I have my height of that ellipse, and I'm going to see how many times it counts into the form itself. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Counts in 4 times. That's super easy because I have my half divider line. Here's another half line, so it's a quarter. Super easy. So that quarter, then again, I'm going to use this guy here. That quarter shape, I'm going to bring up here and mark it. Now I'm going to draw a line straight out. Once I put the ellipse in, this will start to make a lot more sense. Once I put that ellipse in, things will happen. At first, you're going to get frustrated drawing this because you're going to see so many darn lines. But you have to kind of remember, say, all right, this and this is the 2 lines I just put in. I have to put the halfway point so I can put my ellipse in. And because you practice those ellipses so much, you should be pretty good at this by now. That's the halfway point. Now I'm going to draw the halfway point in. Great. All right. Now I'm going to put my ellipse in. Now remember, whenever you put your ellipse in, if it's easier to angle this so you can get your elbow in there, angle this down. It's probably easier to do. So then I can do my arc. If this was flat, it'd be even easier, but I just want to kind of get this done. Do my other arc. Other arc. And you've done this 1,000 times, so I don't have to go deep into detail here in terms of how to do the ellipse. All right, so you can kind of see the ellipse I put in, and you don't have to put it in dark yet. You save that for the very end, just so you can see it. Come on, man. So you can kind of see the ellipse, and then from there, all I have to do is take one of my rulers here. I connect the ellipse, and I'm going to connect it right to, well, I'm not going to connect it yet because there's this line I put in. That is going to represent, is that the bottom of the ellipse or the top of the ellipse? Because the top of the ellipse looks like it's about right here. I'd say it's the bottom of the ellipse. The ellipse, the 2 ellipses that are up here are going to be much smaller in height than this one. We know that because it's higher, it's closer to your eye level. So this line I put in here, I was going to make the middle of the ellipse, but I'm actually going to make it the bottom. So the top one, I'd say would go right here. And that's just from observation. You're just really looking at what you're doing. So I'm going to put this in here. And now I'm going to find the middle point. Looks like it's about right there. I'm throwing that middle point in. I'm relying heavily the middle point's a little high. I'm relying heavily on these graph rulers here. Big time. Alright, that's the halfway point. So now I can start to put my little arc in. It's easier because it's higher above. So I don't have to angle the board down right now. I'll probably do it at some point later on, just to perfect my ellipse. So because this water pitcher, it seems like a really simple form, but it narrows in and has this kind of thin neck part here. It makes it a little bit more tricky to draw. So now you can kind of see that ellipse there, right? Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to connect the exterior, the middle point of this ellipse here on the edge of the line, and I'm going to connect it to the midpoint of this line. Wow, very vocal boy. All right, I'm going to connect it, do the same thing on this side. So you kind of see that I'm already starting to break down the form. In a matter of 15 minutes, I got the basis of that shape in. Now I'm going to add the ellipse up top, and then I'm going to make a new video, or end this video. I'll make a new one when I start to break down another form, and I'll just kind of slowly walk through it. But this ellipse seems to be a little wider. So if you look up there, it's wider than the thinner one. And if you, and I already have the height put in, and I don't have the bottom part, but I kind of marked where I think it is, and I'm gonna go with right here. So what I'm gonna, and this is where things can get kind of dicey. There's so many lines. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put this line in here. I'm gonna make it longer than the others, so I know that that's the bottom. And now I have to find my middle. And so when you're looking in the middle, it might help just to use a piece of paper, put in where that line is, and then you can look at this clean piece of paper and just find the middle on your own. It looks like the middle will be about right here. Because once there's too many lines competing, you can't really find the middle. It's really tricky. I put middle in here. Again, I'll make this longer. So middle, bottom, and then there's the top. I'm gonna make the top longer too. So now I'm just gonna, oh, forgot to make it wider. So it's gonna be a little wider. I can mark it. It's just a smidge wider than the one below it. So I'm just gonna make it a little smidge wider on the right and make it the same smidge wider on the left, and just make sure they're both equal. I'm gonna draw a line straight down from that smidge mark I put in. Do the same thing on this side. Okay. And now I just have to remember, this is the mid line. All right, so I can easily throw in my arc at the top. Because you did so many of these ellipses, you should know what you're doing at this point. And then now I'm going to put an arc at the bottom. So this is the bottom part. And these two ellipses are going to overlap a bit. That's why it's going to get really confusing. There's an arc at the bottom. And then I have an arc here. Just got to find the center. That's the center. And then here's the center right here. And then I connect it. So at this point, that's all I really want to do. I'll come back in, I'll clean that up once I use a softer pencil. For now, that's fine. That's all I needed to do. I have my ellipse down here. I have my picture going out. And I'm going to connect these 2 points, and it kind of goes up a little bit. I was probably a little, after I evaluate what I've done here, what I've done there, I could have probably gone a little lower here. I just didn't have much to compare that measurement to, so I had to make that really educated guess. If I want to, I could lower it and redo it, but for now I'm going to move forward and soldier on. I do not want to put this handle in yet or the spout in yet. You can do that at another time. Move to the next object, and I would put in this object right here. This is the plastic thingy here, and I would put that in next. And after that, I'd put in this object, and you had 1, 2, 3. Once those 3 big forms are in, you can start to fade out to the other forms. Granted, you're not going to have these exact same forms at home, but you'll have something comparable. All right, until next time.